My name is Father Elias, and for the past 15 years, I've served as the Nocturnal Sentinel of St. Agnes Cathedral. It's not a title you'll find in any seminary textbook or diocesan roster. Officially, I'm just a priest assigned to late-night vigils, but those who know the truth call me the Keeper of the Veil. The cathedral, perched on the edge of the old city's crumbling district, isn't like the tourist traps downtown with their gilded altars and echoing choirs. This place is a relic, built in the 14th century over what locals whisper were ancient catacombs, tunnels that twist like veins under the streets, leading to places no map dares acknowledge. The air here always carries a faint tang of damp stone and incense, mixed with something sharper, like ozone before a storm. At night, when the city lights fade and the fog rolls in from the river, the shadows in the nave stretch longer than they should, and the silence isn't empty. It's watchful. I didn't choose this role. It chose me. It started after my predecessor, old Father Harlan, vanished during a midnight mass. They found his cassock folded neatly on the altar steps, but no body, no blood, just a single crimson feather caught in the candle wax. The bishop pulled me aside that very night, his face pale under the flickering gas lamps of his office. "The cardinals come at night," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Not the birds, Elias. Not the men in red. Something else. You must learn the rules, or you'll join Harlan in the dark." I thought he was delirious, grief-stricken. But I've seen them now. Felt their gaze like icy fingers on the back of my neck. And I've learned the rules. The forbidden edicts etched into the cathedral's hidden ledgers, passed down from inquisitors who hunted worse than witches in these walls. Break them, and the impersonators don't just take your form, they unravel you from the inside. It begins with the curfew. Rule 1. After the Vespers bell tolls at 10 p.m., no layperson may enter the cathedral grounds. Not for emergencies, not for shelter from the rain. The gates lock with a key only I hold, and the wards, those faded sigils carved into the iron, glow faintly if something tries to force its way in. I've heard the knocks on those gates, sharp and insistent, like knuckles wrapped in silk. Once, a young woman appeared at the side entrance during a downpour, her habit soaked through, claiming she was a sister from the neighboring abbey, lost in the fog. Her eyes were wrong. Too wide. Pupils swallowing the irises like black wells. I didn't open the door. By dawn, her silhouette was gone. But etched into the wet stone was a handprint, elongated fingers that left no warmth behind. The impersonators mimic the cardinals, those high-ranking clergy who visit unannounced, but they're not holy men. They're echoes, pulled from the catacombs below, hungering for the faith they can never truly wear. The nights deepen after that. Rule 2. Never acknowledge the red birds by name after sunset. The cardinals, the avian kind, perch on the gargoyles and spires come dusk, their crests like tiny crowns dipped in blood. They're harbingers, you see. In the daylight, they're just pests, scavenging crumbs from the plaza. But at night, their calls twist into something else, a low, throaty murmur that sounds like Latin prayers recited backward. If you call out to them, "Cardinal, shoo!" or even whisper their name, it invites the mimicry. I learned this the hard way in my first month. Exhausted from a long confession booth shift, I muttered, "Damn cardinals," at a flock blocking the cloister path. That night, as I knelt in the crypt for my vigil, footsteps echoed from the shadows. A figure in scarlet robes emerged from the altar's blind spot, face obscured by a cowl. It moved like Father Harlan used to, that same limp from an old war wound. But when it spoke, asking for the absolution ledger, its voice was a chorus of wings fluttering in a cage. I fled to the bell tower, heart pounding, and didn't descend until the first light pierced the stained glass. The next morning, the real Father Harlan's replacement arrived. Transferred from Rome, they said. But his limp was on the wrong leg. Down in the catacombs, where the air grows thick with the scent of moldering bone and forgotten oils, the rules tighten like a noose. Rule 3. If you hear chanting from the lower levels, voices in unison rising like smoke, do not descend to investigate. The catacombs aren't just tombs, they're a threshold, a bunker of secrets from the Inquisition days when they sealed away relics that whispered too loudly. Tunnels branch into abandoned chapels, their walls etched with warnings in Enochian script, and deeper still, into chambers where the stone weeps of viscous black fluid that smells of sulfur and regret. The impersonators rise from there, donning the skins of cardinals who've wandered too close to the edge. I've patrolled those depths, only under the bishop's orders, lantern in hand, the flame guttering as if afraid to burn true. Once, the chanting pulled at me, a hymn I knew from my ordination, but laced with syllables that curdled in my ears like nails scraping velvet. I almost followed it, drawn by a compulsion that made my rosary beads burn against my palm. Instead, I recited the rule aloud in my mind, anchoring myself. When I finally peered down the forbidden stair, I saw them. Shapes in cardinal red, huddled around a makeshift altar of cracked skulls, their faces melting into avian beaks mid-prayer. They turned as one, eyes reflecting my lantern light like polished obsidian. I backed away, sealing the grate with trembling hands. That night, dreams plagued me, dreams of wings sprouting from my shoulders, forcing me to preach sermons in a voice not my own. But the true dread builds in the hours before dawn, when the fog seeps through the cracks like a living thing, carrying whispers of the rules yet to come. I've only scratched the surface of the edicts, Elias. There are more, 7 in total, each a chain binding us to survival. Ignore them, and the impersonators don't just take your place. They wear your sins like a second skin, twisting your confessions into curses that echo eternally in these walls. Stay with me, if you dare. The bell tolls soon, and the red shadows are stirring. Listen closely, because the next rule might save your soul, or damn it forever. The fog clings to the cathedral like a shroud, muffling the distant toll of the Vespers bell as it fades into the night. I stand at the nave's edge, my breath visible in the chill that seeps from the flagstones, carrying that acrid hint of feathers and brimstone. It's always like this after the third rule settles in your bones. The compulsion to descend, to chase the chanting into the abyss. But I've held the line, night after night, reciting the edicts like a litany against the unraveling. There are 7 rules in all, Father Elias, carved into the hidden reliquary beneath the high altar, inked in blood from saints long forgotten. The first 3 are warnings. The next bind you tighter, demanding sacrifices of will and flesh. Ignore them, and the impersonators don't merely mimic, they infest, turning your own voice against you in the confessional. Rule 4. In the witching hour, between midnight and the false dawn, you must light the 7 vigil candles on the perimeter altar, but never with a match struck by your own hand. The flame must come from the eternal wick in the crypt's antechamber, a blue-tinged fire that never consumes its taper, fed by oils distilled from the catacombs' weeping stones. I remember my first such vigil, hands slick with sweat as I descended the spiral stair, the walls closing in with their bas-reliefs of winged inquisitors, eyes hollowed out as if pecked clean. The air down there hummed, thick with the rot of ancient vestments and the faint, rhythmic drip of that black ichor pooling in the corners. I reached the antechamber, a vaulted nook where the stone pulsed faintly, like a heart buried alive. The eternal wick flickered in its brass holder, casting shadows that writhed like serpents across the floor. With trembling fingers, I lit a splinter from it and hurried back up, the borrowed flame warm against my palm, almost alive. But as I placed the candles around the altar, 7 stubs of beeswax infused with myrrh and something metallic, like old blood. The shadows resisted. One flame guttered out immediately, snuffed by an unseen gust that smelled of wet plumage. I relit it from the eternal source, whispering the invocation. By the veil's grace, hold the night at bay. That's when I saw it. A silhouette at the transept's edge, cloaked in cardinal scarlet, its cowl tilted as if listening. It didn't move, but the air grew heavy, pressing on my chest like a confessor's unspoken sin. The figure raised a hand, fingers too long, jointed like a bird's talons, and beckoned. I froze, heart slamming against my ribs. If I'd acknowledged it, even with a nod, the rule would shatter. Instead, I completed the circle, the candles flaring brighter, their light carving harsh angles across the pews. The silhouette dissolved into mist, but not before leaving a trail of crimson feathers on the marble, each one quivering as if breathing. By morning, a visiting cardinal from the diocese arrived for inspection, his robes pristine, but when he passed those feathers, his face twisted in confusion. "I've never seen such birds here," he muttered, and in his eyes, for a split second, the pupils dilated like ink in water. Was it him? Or had they already begun their masquerade? The hours drag after that, the cathedral's silence fracturing into subtle creaks and sighs, as if the building itself resents the watch. Rule 5. Should a confessor arrive unbidden after the candles are lit, claiming urgent absolution, you may hear their tale, but never grant full pardon without the bishop's seal. These impersonators crave validation, you see. They feed on the absolution of sins they never committed, twisting it into a key that unlocks the veil further. The confessionals in St. Agnes are relics themselves, booths of dark oak, carved with thorns and halos, their lattices veined like feathers. I've sat in the priest's side countless times, the kneeler's cushion worn thin from knees that sought mercy in vain. One fog-shrouded night, as the candles burned low, a knock echoed through the grill. 3 sharp raps, then a pause, then 2 more, like a code from the old rites. "Father," came the voice, smooth as polished stone, laced with an accent I couldn't place, perhaps Italian or something older, guttural. "I am Cardinal Voss, en route from the conclave. The road was treacherous, shadows pursued my carriage. I must unburden before the light fails. My blood ran cold. No cardinal was expected. The ledgers confirmed it. But the voice mimicked authority, rich and resonant, carrying the weight of sermons I'd heard in my youth. Through the lattice, I glimpsed the outline, red silk shimmering, a pectoral cross glinting faintly. He began his confession, tales of forbidden pacts in Vatican vaults, of relics that whispered temptations to the elect. It was seductive, pulling at me, urging the words of absolution to my lips. But Rule 5 held me back. "The seal is required," I said, voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Silence fell, thick and accusing. Then a low chuckle, like wings rustling in dry leaves. "The bishop delays, Father. Mercy now, or the shadows claim us both." The lattice creaked, and I smelled it. Ozone and incense mingled with the metallic tang of blood. I bolted the door from inside, reciting the edict under my breath. When I emerged at dawn, the booth was empty, but the kneeler bore scorch marks, and in the dust, a pattern of tiny footprints, clawed and backward. Deeper into the night, as the candles dwindle to stubs, the catacombs stir again, their thresholds blurring. Rule 6. If the red birds gather in flocks of 13 or more on the outer spires, sounding their backward prayers, you must perform the binding rite in the bell tower, ringing the vesper bell exactly 13 times, but facing away from the city toward the river's fog. The tower is a gauntlet of narrow stairs, slick with condensation, the air growing thinner, colder, until you reach the belfry where the massive bell hangs like a judgment. Wind howls through the slits, carrying the birds' cries. Dominus vobiscum, twisted into Mokisbov sunimod, a mockery that claws at your sanity. I've climbed those stairs in terror, the wood groaning underfoot, splinters catching my cassock like desperate fingers. Last solstice, the flock amassed, 13 crimson shapes silhouetted against the moon, their eyes glowing like embers. The prayers began, burrowing into my skull, urging descent. I reached the tower, palms bleeding from gripping the rail, and pulled the rope. 1 toll, 2, the bell's voice booming, vibrating through my bones. By the 13th, sweat stung my eyes, and below, in the plaza, shapes moved. More cardinals, emerging from the fog, their processional slow and deliberate, mitres tilted at unnatural angles. They gathered at the gates, chanting in unison with the birds, hands raised in supplication that looked more like claws extended. The final toll shattered the air, and they scattered like smoke, but not before one pressed against the iron wards. Its face, oh God, its face, melted into a beak, splitting wide to reveal a maw of jagged teeth and writhing tongues. I collapsed against the wall, gasping, the rope burning my hands raw. Dawn broke with the real birds fleeing, but the impersonator's echo lingered in my dreams. A cardinal's form wearing my own face, preaching from the pulpit, absolving the damned with my voice. These rules, Elias, they're the threads holding the veil intact, but they're fraying. The 7th looms, the one that demands the ultimate vigil, where the impersonators reveal their true hunger. The fog thickens now, and I hear footsteps in the aisles, soft, padded, like talons on stone. The night isn't over. If you're listening, heed this. The red shadows multiply, and soon they may knock at your door. The bell tolls again, closer. Prepare yourself, for the final rule could be your last confession. The fog has thickened into a living pall, coiling around the cathedral's spires like the breath of something ancient and resentful, blotting out the stars until the sky itself seems to press down on St. Agnes. I pace the nave now, my footsteps muffled on the cold marble, each one echoing back as a faint, mocking flutter, like wings brushing against the vaulted ceiling far above. The vigil candles have burned to their wicks, pooling wax that hardens into grotesque shapes, twisted miters, elongated beaks, hands clasped in eternal prayer. The air tastes of ash and iron, heavy with the residue of the binding rite, and in the distance, from the catacombs' sealed grate, a low murmur rises again, not chanting this time, but a singular voice, reciting my own confessions from years past, twisted into accusations that slither under my skin. You've endured this far with me, listener, through the edicts that chain us to the light. The first 6 rules are bulwarks, fragile as the wards on the gates, but they pale before the 7th, the final vigil, the one that demands not just obedience, but surrender. It's etched deepest in the reliquary's ledger, in letters that shift when you read them, as if the ink itself recoils from the truth. Rule 7. When the impersonators breach the perimeter, manifesting as a conclave of cardinals at the high altar, their forms flickering between flesh and feather, you must offer the reckoning chalice, filled not with wine, but with your own blood, drawn under the moonlight through the oculus window. But never, never drink from it yourself. The chalice is no ordinary vessel. It's a relic from the catacombs' heart, forged in the 14th century from the fused bones of inquisitors who delved too deep, their marrow calcified into silver-veined porcelain. It sits hidden in the sacristy, behind a false panel scarred with claw marks from those who've sought it before. Touch it unworthily, and it burns like holy water on the damned. I first invoked this rule 2 winters ago, during the longest night of the year, when the fog carried the scent of river mud and decaying vestments up from the tunnels below. The candles had guttered out one by one, despite the eternal wick's borrowed flame, leaving the nave in near darkness, pierced only by slivers of moonlight filtering through the stained glass, depictions of saints with eyes that seemed to follow my every turn. The air grew oppressive, charged with static that raised the hairs on my arms. And then I heard them. Footsteps, dozens of them, ascending from the crypt stairs in perfect procession. Soft at first, like silk robes whispering over stone, then sharper, clicking like talons on tile. They emerge from the shadows of the transept, 13 figures in cardinal scarlet, miters casting long shadows that merged into one writhing mass behind them. Their faces were obscured at first, cowls drawn low, but as they approached the altar, the moonlight caught their features. Pale skin stretched taut over avian bone structure, eyes like polished garnets reflecting the absent candlelight. "Father Elias," their leader intoned, voice a harmonious blend of Gregorian chant and the rasping call of corvids. "The conclave convenes, the veil thins, we seek communion." They moved with unnatural grace, parting the pews without touch, their robes trailing faint wisps of crimson mist that smelled of sulfur and sacramental wine gone sour. One carried a crozier topped with a crystal that pulsed like a heartbeat. Another a thurible from which no smoke rose, only a chill vapor that frosted the air. I knew then, They weren't mere echoes. This was the breach, the impersonators in full masquerade, drawn by the frayed edges of the previous rules. My predecessor, Father Harlan, must have faced this. His cassock on the steps, the feather in the wax, it was the aftermath of refusal. Heart pounding, I retreated to the sacristy, the door's hinges creaking like a dying breath. The panel slid open with a rasp, revealing the chalice on its velvet cushion, its surface etched with Enochian runes that glowed faintly blue. My hands shook as I pricked my finger with the silver lancet hidden beside it. A thorn from a crown replica, they say. And let the blood well up, dripping into the bowl until it filled halfway, dark and viscous under the moonlight spilling through the narrow window. The liquid swirled on its own, forming eddies that whispered fragments of Latin. Peccavi, non sum dignus. I am not worthy. Carrying it back to the altar, the weight pulled at me, heavier than any Eucharist, as if it drew the cathedral's very stones into its depths. The conclave waited, arrayed in a semicircle, their garnet eyes fixed on the chalice with a hunger that made my stomach churn. "Offer it," the leader urged, extending a hand that elongated into feathers mid-reach, "and seal the night anew." I placed it on the altar, stepping back as the rule demanded, my blood bubbling softly, releasing tendrils of steam that carried the metallic tang of fear. They encircled it, murmuring in reverse prayers, their forms blurring, beaks protruding from cowled faces, wings unfurling beneath scarlet folds. One dipped a talon into the chalice, and the air screamed, a sound like tearing silk and shattering glass, the wards on the walls flaring white-hot. The impersonators convulsed, their mimicry fracturing, robes dissolving into feathers, bodies collapsing into piles of crimson ash that smoldered without heat. Leaving only the chalice intact, my blood evaporated, the bowl gleaming empty. But the cost lingers. That night, as dawn clawed its way through the fog, I found feathers embedded in my palms where I'd gripped the lancet too tight. Red, soft, pulsing faintly before crumbling to dust. And in the mirror of the sacristy, for a fleeting moment, my reflection wore a mitre, eyes garnet bright. The seventh rule saves the cathedral, binds the veil, but it marks you. The impersonators retreat, but they learn your scent, your sins, waiting for the next breach. Now, as the fog recedes and the first light touches the spires, I warn you. The rules are etched in blood, not ink. St. Agnes stands, but for how long? The catacombs whisper of more, entities beyond the cardinals, hungrier shadows stirring in the bunkers beneath the city. If a figure in red knocks at your door after Vespers, remember, do not answer. Do not name the birds. Light no flame of your own. Confess nothing without seal. Bind the bell away from the light, and if they gather at your altar, offer what is yours, but never partake. The impersonators are patient, eternal. They wear the holy to hunt the faithful. The emergency alert blares in my soul. Something is coming, dressed as salvation. Lock your gates, pray the rules hold, or join me in the vigil that never ends. The fog returns tonight, Listen for the footsteps. They sound like yours.